What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Home Built Workshop. Today we are talking leather strops. I'm also going to make this cool bench strop, and hopefully I can answer some of your guys' questions. Stick around, check it out. So a while back I made a video on making this little handheld strop, just a piece of wood with leather attached to it. I use it for sharpening all kinds of things around the house, around the shop. Kitchen knives, pocket knives, plane irons, a lot of things can be sharpened on this, and I definitely recommend the use of a strop for fine-tuning an edge. It works really great, but one downside to this is that it is handheld. So if you're trying to sharpen something on here, you've got to switch hands, and you can't really hold it steady very well if you're trying to do something that maybe requires two hands. I decided I need to make a bench strop, something I can mount in the vise. That way it's firmly mounted and I can use both hands for steadying whatever it is that I'm trying to sharpen. So this project is going to be really simple. I found this piece of 1/2-inch plywood. This was reclaimed from an old project, had some finish on there. I lightly sanded it off because we're going to end up gluing some pieces together on this. That way the glue will stick really well. First thing I need to do, rip this sucker down.
Just in case you guys are curious of the dimensions, I'm making this piece about 3 inches wide by about 16 inches long. The dimensions of this piece really aren't that critical. Just use what you have and make it to your liking.
So here are the pieces that are going to make up the bench strop. We're going to end up with a double layer of 1/2-inch plywood. That should be nice and sturdy. The piece that I cut in half, I'm going to glue on like this. Now there's some damage at the ends of some of this plywood just from being torn apart from an old project. I'm going to end up trimming this off here and trimming this edge off up here, but all we need to do now, glue it up.
The pin nails will help keep the pieces from sliding around while the glue sits up. Now just clamp these together for a little while until that glue dries.
So just a quick story that I want to share with you guys. From very early on as a kid, I learned the importance of stropping a blade on leather. I remember my grandpa used to sit in his chair sometimes in the evening, and he would be sharpening his knife on the stone, and once he got it all sharpened up, he would sit there with his work boot and he would strop it on the back of his work boot. And I never forget that, and for a very long time I did the exact same thing. I would sharpen my knife on a stone, and then I would take it to the back of my work boot. And then now that I've made some strops, now I use those. But occasionally when I find myself sharpening, I don't have the strop at hand, I will still give it a couple of strops on the back of the heel of my leather work boots. Something that I got from my grandpa. I remember that from a long time ago and never really will forget that one.
As soon as that glue's dry, I can square up the ends. Now I'll just use the old roll of tape trick to radius the edges on this thing. I know if I leave these with sharp corners, I'll smash into them and it'll hurt. Now I'll just cut a piece of leather to fit on the top of the strop.
I'm just going to clamp this thing upside down on my table and we'll let it dry. So once the glue is dry, now we've got a strop that's ready to be clamped in the vise, charged with some compound and put to use. Now I used wood glue on this, and I've never had an issue with wood glue holding the leather well, especially in an application like this. There's not a lot of pressure that's really going to be put on it. You could use contact cement or any other glue meant for leather, but for an application like this, I've had good luck just using regular old wood glue. So now, let's clamp this thing in the vise and I'll show you how I use it.
Before I can use the strop, I need to charge the leather with some polishing compound. This green compound is an extra fine buffing compound. It comes in these big sticks and works really well. I've had this stick for quite a while.
It's going to take a little while to get this compound well soaked into the leather. After a few uses though, it'll start to fill in really well. Now for something like a pocket knife, really easy. You're just going to draw it across the leather. When you're pulling it across the leather, you want to try to maintain the same bevel that's on the blade. It's like using a very fine abrasive or a really fine stone. Just polishes that edge and really makes it nice and sharp. I also like to use these for irons for a hand plane and a spoke shave. This is one for a spoke shave. Now you could use a guide to hold it at the angle. You could run it along here and that would work just fine. But really, if you just carefully find your angle, and give it a few passes, really makes that edge polished. Now it'll probably take more than 5 or 6 passes, but maybe after 20 or 30 passes, it really puts a nice edge on there. And you'll notice here that it's starting to turn a little bit black. That is the material that's being removed from the blade. This will begin to get worked in and it'll really darken up. For the first few uses, I'll keep reapplying the compound until it gets worked in all along the leather. Again, this is just going to take some time. It kind of just needs to get broken in. What about a chisel? Same thing. Find your angle. Just pull it across the leather. Really polishes it up, gives it a nice edge. Although I really don't ever do it, you could strop a blade for a utility knife using the same method. I will use this method from time to time on something like an X-Acto blade. If I'm making a lot of cuts in something, I need to keep that blade nice and sharp so that way the cuts stay nice and clean. I will pass it across the strop a few times and I have noticed some benefit in doing that. The blade seems to last a little bit longer. For something like a utility knife like this though, a lot of times it's just as easy to just swap out the blade. They're so inexpensive. But if you wanted to do it, there's absolutely no reason that you couldn't. So that's just a few uses for a strop like that, but there's one more type that I want to make really quick, and that is specifically for sharpening this beveling tool for leather work. So far, to sharpen my beveling tool, I've just been passing the back edge on my strop, and that seems to work pretty good. But recently I saw someone sharpening the front edge by passing this on a leather strop, but on the edge of a piece of leather. So I want to make a small strop that I can use to try to sharpen the inside of this bevel.
All I need to do is square up a piece of scrap wood, and then I'll just cut a shallow kerf down the center. Then we'll just take a piece of leather and insert it into the kerf. Now this ended up being a little bit tricky. My leather may have been just a little bit thick for this. But after a little bit of hammering, we got it. We'll just charge it with some compound like the other strop and try it out.
So there you have it, guys. A few of my strops, including this nice new bench strop. Looking forward to using this one. It's gonna be really handy being able to clamp that in a vise while you're doing some sharpening. Now in the video where I made this one, I don't believe I mentioned the length. This leather piece is about 13 inches long, and really I feel that that's just a little bit too long. I probably could have shortened it up to 12 or maybe even 10 inches and still been completely usable. I also have this little one that I keep in my leather box. I use it for sharpening chisels and stuff. This is about 5.5 inches long. Works perfect for that. I think it would be a little bit too small for sharpening knives or stuff like that, but for the chisels for leather punching, it works out really well. And this little one for the beveling tool, we'll see how that works out. I may need to make a version 2 depending on how this works, but I'm going to be trying this out for sure. So about the only strap that I don't have is just a plain leather strap that maybe you used to use for sharpening like a straight razor or something like that. I haven't found that I need one yet, but maybe at some point I'll make one. It'd be a fun, simple leather project as well. So I hope you guys found this video helpful, maybe answered a question or two about some strops, help give you some ideas maybe about making your own. If you do still have a question, go ahead and leave it in the video comments and I'll try to answer that as I can. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Well, that's not gonna work. I marked it out on this side. I can't follow the lines.